Hey Parasocials! Today I'm going to be doing an unboxing and a long-term review for the 2020 12.9-inch iPad Pro. So I bought this iPad Pro back in May, and I had been wanting to buy the 2018 iPad Pro for a while. But the 2020 iPad Pro was rumored to have a mini LED display and to come with a new A14X processor. One of those things came true. Just kidding. None of them came true. They're rumored for the next iPad Pro, which supposedly will either come out at the end of this year, pretty soon, or next year. I'll be doing a review on that one when it comes out. This iPad Pro came separately from all of the other accessories. The Apple Pencil ironically came first, so I couldn't do anything. Then the iPad arrived, and then about a week later, the Magic Keyboard arrived. So it was kind of annoying. Everything was splintered across. And it turns out that the Magic Keyboard that came with my iPad originally was actually dented on the bottom, so I had to return it, and I'll talk more about that later. This video has timeline stamps, as you can see across here on the bottom. I'm going to be saying which different parts of the video are what part of the review. I suggest you watch all of it just for the benefit of getting my full opinion on this. And I will say that I have bought this device and I've kept it past the return date, so you will be getting my full and unbridled opinion, and I feel no obligations to Apple as a company or anything. So you're going to hear the good, bad, and the very, very ugly. I'm going to start with the iPad Pro first. So this is the 12.9-inch 2020 iPad Pro. I got it in space gray with 256 gigabytes of storage, and I got it custom engraved on the back. So it's kind of, quirky. I was really excited for the engraving. I got it on the iPad and the Apple Pencil. If I could have, I would have gotten the keyboard case engraved too, but since it's polyurethane, that wouldn't really make sense. I guess I could paint something on it, but that's whatever. The iPad Pro. It's really powerful. It's what I use now to edit all my videos. I've done 3D modeling on it. I do drawing for design school. It really has become integrated into my work life and my leisure life. It has a beautiful screen, 120 Hz, and I like to use it to watch movies and TV shows, as well as play some music through its great quad speaker setup while I'm cooking sometimes, but that's more rare. I tend to use my phone. It's actually quite powerful, the A12Z processor, which is a minor refresh over the last one, and it also includes a hardware encoder and decoder for H.265, which is what I use to film all my videos in. That is very important, because when I'm editing my 4K videos, that hardware decoder and encoder accelerates the process so much that my iPad is actually faster than my desktop. Now, my desktop's quite old at this point, but it just shows the sheer amount of power that this thing has inside of it, and all of that in a thin, light, and fanless design. One thing that isn't light is the Magic Keyboard, but that's for later. The iPad Pro also features excellent gaming performance. Though I don't game that much on my iPad, and it is quite big and cumbersome to try and game on such a large tablet. Next, I want to talk about the iPad Pro and the Magic Keyboard combo. It's actually really nice to type on. I type my scripts now on this, and I type all my stuff for school, aside from the stuff that I make on my desktop, which is very little at this point. It makes a really great typing sound. It's really great to type on. There's pretty great key travel on it, and it's nice overall. It's a great step up from my 2012 MacBook Air, which is, aside from being tiny, it also has a quite squishy keyboard, which used to be the standard for great keyboards for a while, that and the MacBook Pros. It's a membrane keyboard. This new Magic Keyboard, which has the Magic Keyboard inside of it. It's kind of confusing when you're trying to talk about it, but it doesn't have the butterfly switches anymore. The butterfly switches were really shallow. I never was really a fan of them, but I could type quite fast. The keys were also like this large size, which made finding the right keys kind of difficult. This Magic Keyboard, though, it has greater travel, and the keys are properly spaced and they're properly sized, so it makes it, getting used to typing on it is really fast. You can type really quickly, and it has separated arrows as well. There's no funky odd layouts. The only thing that's different about it is that it doesn't have a function row of keys. Now I will say something, is that this iPad is pretty light, you know? It's around 600 to 700 grams. This keyboard is actually well into the 700 grams range. So it actually weighs more than the iPad Pro, which I like the lightness of the iPad Pro. This is excellent to carry around by hand, but with the Magic Keyboard, it becomes kind of heavy and defeats the purpose of it being so portable. Though it makes sense because it helps the iPad key from tipping backwards because it's so heavy, it's just kind of a downside. Another downside is that this case does not actually go farther back than this. This is as far back as it'll go, which is fine when you're sitting down like I am now, and it's at a desk about this height because you can see properly at this angle. But if you're doing anything remotely standing up, it really needs to be farther about back here, which is another like 5 to 10 degrees, which could have really put this over the top. The lack of function row hasn't been too big of an issue for me. That's partially because of Apple's bad hardware integration with apps, and third parties haven't been updating for the need for that function row. Also, all of my stuff is set to automatic, so automatic brightness for the screen and automatic brightness for the keyboard, and it really hasn't annoyed me that the keyboard light comes on. I haven't really noticed a lot of battery drainage issues with the keyboard together with the iPad Pro, though I had one day recently where my iPad Pro got really low, and it was pretty early in the day, though that might have been a fluke, and I was also using it pretty heavily during that time period with my brightness maxed out just for drawing clarity. Another pro tip with the Magic Keyboard for drawing. A lot of people, like a lot of YouTubers have been saying, oh, just use it like this. A lot of them aren't artists. They don't realize that your hand has to be on this for a little bit longer than 5 seconds for the video shoot, but it starts to droop down pretty quickly, especially if you're pretty heavy-handed like me. And even if you're not, this is still a blockage, so you can't move your hand farther up. And when you do push down too hard, it just falls flat. So what I do instead is I'll actually use my iPad and I'll pop it off the back and then use it against the front lip of the Magic Keyboard like that, which gives me some pretty free range of angles out to here, which isn't excellent, but it's good enough for some drawing use cases, and I can always bring it farther up for certain things, but at that point you might as well just hook it onto the keyboard and use it like it's meant to be used. See, this angle here can then be brought down to here. So it's a lot more comfortable than the maximum angle on the Magic Keyboard, but it's not ideal. Next, I want to talk about the Apple Pencil 2. I got mine custom engraved as well, and mine came pretty oddly out of the box. The nib was actually partially unscrewed like this, so when I used the iPad, it would make contact most of the time, but then the rest of the time it would be really spotty, and I couldn't tell why. I almost accidentally sent this back to Apple saying it was broken with the Apple Care Plus, which would have gotten me down one return policy with this, which would have been really annoying. But thankfully I realized that I could screw it back in. It was just an odd quality control type issue where it probably doesn't happen to most people, but that was my experience. In terms of the experience of it with the iPad Pro, it's actually really excellent. One of the things I updated with the iPad Pro 2020, and I think might have been retroactive to the 2018 iPad Pros, was the addition of 9 milliseconds of latency. So the iPad Pro 2020 is now really good for handwriting and for drawing. And I just love using it because of how low its latency is. I'll just give an example. Here I have Procreate, and you can see that it keeps up super well. Like, it's insane how well it keeps up with it, and handwriting on it feels really natural. Like, it can actually keep up with my awful bad handwriting, which is pretty impressive considering my handwriting is pretty sloppy sometimes, which is something I'm improving on. But for me, it's really important to have that low latency so I can write correctly and draw correctly. Though I draw a lot more than I do write. The Apple Pencil also has a pretty long battery life. It stays charged for a really long time, though I have noticed that the battery gets pretty close to 0 when I'm using it, but that's only for drawing for a really long time, trying to trace stuff or just paint in general. But The good news is, if you're drawing for 6 hours or 8 hours, depending on your use case, which you probably shouldn't be doing that for that long, but if you do draw for that long and it drops down to completely zero, it charges up really, really fast. In about half an hour, it's completely charged and you're good to go. Though you'll get a pretty long time of usage if you just go to the restroom and leave it charging, or eat something and leave it charging. Something else I wanted to talk about with the Apple Pencil 2 is that a lot of YouTubers and other people have been showing the Apple Pencil being stuck on securely with your iPad. Oh, look at me, I can shake it and it doesn't come off. If I shake it like this, it doesn't happen. But if you're holding it closer to the bottom edge and you trip or you stumble, you can actually have an issue where the Apple Pencil comes off. An example would be this. That wasn't even as hard as I could flick it. That was about half arm strength for a relatively healthy teenage person. But you can see it comes off, it just kind of like kinks off pretty fast if you're holding it close to the bottom. Even on the middle, you can get it to come off really easily, which is pretty bad if you trip or stumble and this comes off and hits concrete or something. You could scuff the plastic up pretty bad or damage the tip. Something I find irritating, and something I find even more irritating because there's actually enough space on the bar down here at the bottom. If they engineered it, they could have put the Apple Pencil inside, either in the middle, or had it slot into the side through here, which would have been excellent in terms of keeping the pencil safe while the iPad's attached, especially since when you're using the iPad and you have to put it into your backpack, and it's attached to the top. If you have a fabric backpack or any backpack in general that can have a fold, it'll catch on the nib. All it has to do is a little bit of pressure, boop, and it pops off into your bag. And then a textbook crushes it, or something else could happen, damage the tip, then it's no longer useful. Kind of irritating. Wish they had designed it better. If it was attached somehow, or if the magnets were even stronger, or there was a groove or something. Not here to talk about the design decision into it. Just warning you, if you get this, it'll come off in your bag pretty easily. Depending on what direction it gets hit, it can be easier. The back is really easy to pop it off, actually. And finally, I want to talk about the whole software and hardware experience. Software-wise, I would say it's good. For iPad software, if you're using just the iPad, it's excellent. Just the iPad and Apple Pencil 2, it's excellent, but it falters at Apple Pencil, iPad, and Magic Keyboard integration. The keyboard especially is problematic because the iPad won't register when it's plugged in sometimes. More often than not in Procreate or in Safari if I'm editing a Google Slides, or in Apple Keynote, I'll have to pop the iPad off briefly and then pop it back on, so it'll recognize the keyboard and it'll recognize my typing, which is really inexcusable for something that's supposed to be as easy as one click. It doesn't work most of the time that I'm trying to do something important. When I'm doing other things, it works just fine. It seems to pick me out when I'm angry. And that's really the overall tone for this device, is that it works really well when it does, but when it doesn't work, it's just really a nuisance. Something I want to talk about in the software is the multitasking experience. So here, if I just hold up, which is already kind of annoying to do, let's say I'm in Procreate. Let's go over to Apple TV+. Now I can just swipe back four pages and I get to Procreate again. Now if I do that same thing, I stay here for a little bit, I interact with Apple TV+, I say like, oh look, excellent TV show, let's watch this, or whatnot. Now when I go to swipe back to the right, I can't swipe back. I have to swipe to the left, and the app is there. Now you might say, oh, that's so convenient because it brings the most recent app to you, so all you have to do is swipe left. But then when you're actually working and you're not thinking consciously about how the multitasking works, then you're like, oh, let me swipe right to get back to Procreate, and then you're like, it's not there, and you have to swipe left, which is, I think it's something I could get used to if I use this for long enough, but I've been using this since May, and it's now October, and I still haven't gotten used to the fact that I have to swipe left after long enough. Other hardware integration, software integration wise, the keyboard's just buggy. There aren't enough apps that support it well to make it a really viable laptop replacement. Just because It's just on the edge of being perfect, but it isn't. Especially when it comes to certain Apple productivity apps like Apple Keynote, it just doesn't work well. Apple Keynote was clearly designed for touch in mind, and even then, it's a very limited app in general. It works really well with Google Slides, however. I haven't had too many issues with it. And just my experience with Apple in general. The keyboard came dented, which I got replaced fine. It was $50 fine. Customer service was excellent. They weren't aggressive or anything. But the fact that I had to return the Magic Keyboard, my nib came loose, and my iPad buttons wiggle weird, is just something that I think is a fit and finish issue, which, considering all 4 of the Apple products I have gotten have had these fit and finish issues, this one with an uneven lip on the side of the iPad Pro. You see this side is shorter than this side, and the bulge on the back is uneven, protruding more on the right side than on the left side. These kind of quality control things aren't what I would expect from a $1,700 package, and this is on the low end, remember. You can configure this up to $2,000+. I find it kind of sad that this product would come so flawed, but even in minor ways. If there was like a major flaw, a major design flaw, I could write it off as, oh, it was a bad design decision. This is just improper manufacturing, improper quality control. Something I find unacceptable at this price range. But considering I got most of my issues fixed and the rest are all cosmetic issues, I'd say it's okay for this time around. Now for my recommendation. I don't recommend this for everyone. I really only recommend this for people who've got the cash. If you've got the money to spend and you're willing to spend it on something that may or may not be what you want, then go for this. Or if you're a student and you have enough cash to buy it first outright, then buy it, and if you don't like it within 15 days, return it. I recommend this for students who are wealthy and can either afford it or their parents can afford it, because it covers most all student needs, except for when you have to install legacy software, in which case you can use a VM. Something like Shadow PC works really great for installing Windows programs. For professionals, I'd recommend this only to creative professionals or people who can drop the money on it. Essentially, that's the main tone here. People who have the cash and creatives. Because that's really all the people that can take advantage of the features that this device has. 120Hz screen, great color accuracy and pen support, covers most artistic needs. Great audio from the speakers and great microphone setup cover audio workers who can work on iOS, things like GarageBand. It falters when it comes to actual analog devices because it doesn't have any analog inputs. But creative professionals. The feature set, like 120Hz screen, great color accuracy, great pen input, works great for digital artists and illustrators. The excellent processor and fanless design works great for nomads and the lightweight as well, the portable package essentially. Works excellent for nomads and creative professionals, people who don't need legacy software or aren't pinned down to it, or are willing to work within the iOS's limitations. And that's where it gets to the point. You have to be able to work with iOS because it will not work with you. So if you're willing to put in the work to figure out the workflow on this device, then I suggest buy it, use it for 15 days. If you don't like it, return it. But that's really where my recommendation ends. You really have to have the cash and the will to work with this device. Have a great day. I've been RTG2. Like and subscribe, leave a comment down below, and share it with some friends. Thank you so much.